Welcome to another edition of the Dementia Care Partner Talk Show. Now, here's dementia care expert Teepa Snow and your host, Greg Phelps.
Hello and welcome to the Dementia Care Partners podcast. I'm your host, Greg Phelps, along with dementia care expert Teepa Snow. And Teepa, in the news, World Elder Abuse Awareness is celebrated June 15th each year, providing an opportunity for communities to stand together against abuse, mistreatment, and neglect of older people. It's just a personal thing. I just don't like the word celebrated in that story because elder abuse is real. And it's likely underreported, as many can't speak for themselves for a variety of reasons. With all your experience, no doubt you've come across situations of elder abuse. This is a topic that we can go in several different directions, but I'll just throw it to you and see where you think we should concentrate.
Wow. Hey, Greg, you know, those skill figures, I think there are three directions. And I think there's the physical, psychological abuse that might be going on. There's the financial abuse or space abuse, like abuse of space or abuse of finances, like the environmental. And then there's the return abuse that might be taking place when somebody's living with dementia. When you do those two things to me, I may not be passive. I might, in which case I become silent and withdrawn and bad things happen, but I might fight back on that front. And it often happens in spouse relationships or parent-child relationships, where if I don't know how to provide support and care to you because I haven't been trained, then I can become abusive in how I'm doing things. But I want to call it care because I feel like I am providing care, but I could be off on that, or I could actually be trying to take advantage of the situation. So, you know, to me, it's, you know, that idea of financial abuse or economic abuse or even environmental situation abuse where I take over spaces or whatever, and I'm the abuser. But in return, there might be abuse happening in both directions, and it could be unintentional or it could be very intentional. But then there's the physical, emotional, psychological abuse that often comes in a relationship that isn't healthy. But we're talking about unhealthy relationships overall. And if there was a history of being abused, there's a greater risk of then abusing. And so particularly if our story has not been a good story, and I, like you, when you said the word celebration, and with elder abuse, it like was such a mismatch because we obviously need to raise awareness and increase knowledge and develop skill, but to celebrate it is, you know, and that idea, because this is the celebration of, it's like, I don't know, the wording there sounds off.
So we'll just narrow in on one particular aspect of it. What do you do if you think there might be elder abuse going on somewhere? I don't know in Canada if we have a number, and I'm sorry, I should have checked this, where we could phone and report. I know that our local police force, we have a small town police force here, very good about dealing with persons living with dementia. But I don't know what skills they have. So you could be all by yourself in trying to sort this out.
You can. And, you know, in the States, we have what's called Adult Protective Services. It's a social support network. It's a governmental agency. We also have the police force, but much as you said, EMS is another one. But it can really misinterpret data. If I'm a neighbor and I hear the son yelling at the mom or the mom yelling at the son, or I see mom sitting in the car, I could make assumptions. And what I would say is, how comfortable are you with assessment? How objective could you be in your language? So, Greg, what's the difference between, I'm pretty sure that there's a son that's abusing his mother versus, so Greg, I'm concerned because I'm hearing interactions that don't sound like healthy interactions. There seems to be a lot of raised voices. There seem to be some swearing going on and some crying going on. And I'm wondering if there's someone who could take a look at the situation. I live nearby and we've never had a close relationship before, so I don't really know the couple, but I must say the things I've heard have concerned me. Is there someone on your team or your task force or your service that might be able to investigate and figure out what's happening?
With your skill set, you sort of have carefully placed a bunch of issues onto a platter and given it to them. Now, if they drop the platter, that's not really on you, but you're still going to be aware of it because you won't see things changing. So who needs to develop these skills? Because obviously in families it's great, but I mean, who else needs to learn this?
Well, I think some of the really sad realities is we don't prepare professional groups, whether they be EMS, law enforcement, social services, social workers, nurses, public health providers, private health providers, service providers, and family members who are starting to notice brain changes. We don't prepare anybody for this element. We understand it could be happening, but what we don't realize was the regularity with which it happens in the world of dementia. And unfortunately, because it happens too regularly, we start to accept it as typical and normal, rather than seeing it as a problem that's out of control and it's epidemic. And that's what I think is missing, is the alarm that we should be raising in the number of cases that happen. Because by the time state attorneys general, and I don't know what your legal system is in Canada as much, by the time they get involved, the money's gone, the resources are used, the person's already died or is impaired beyond where we can recover because of the abuse that has taken place, one direction or the other. And I think we're waiting way too long to get curious and to start a process of preparation for this kind of thing.
There are so many groups that suddenly sprang to mind, like the legal system, the police, the emergency services. Like there's a whole bunch of people really need to know some of this information if they're even being brushed by it. So I recall you had a CD out. Yes, remember the CDs? Do we still have those?
We actually,
and it was
Greg, you are dating yourself because we do things online now and we have streaming. And yeah, you could still get a DVD these days, DVD of that content. But I would say we have streaming and we have it in smaller bites. But we also have for EMS and for emergency services, we've started actually having it in learning kits that people could purchase and then deliver. Small pieces, large pieces, if you're already a trainer. So one of the places to start is figure out how to train people first and then offer information and skill building. And so that's where we often would recommend people start is, do you need some skills? Yeah. All right, well, start with your own skills before you start pointing fingers at somebody else.
So would I want to talk to one of your consultants and find out, can I lay out sort of what I'm dealing with and maybe get some recommendations? Because each case is exactly the same, but different.
Yeah, and they start with 6 pieces of the puzzle. So we can start to look at what are some interactions and causes and potential areas of shift. And that gives you the power to make choices that might be the area to try at least before we move forward into the next step. So rather than immediately calling the police and saying, I think there's abuse going on, to do that consult and say, it does sound like there's something going on there worth noting. So let's identify what are your possible resources in the area and what does each have primary responsibility for before we move forward into calling a particular person. And let's rehearse what the language might be when you make the call so they aren't thinking that you're an alarmist, but instead you have data of import.
Teepa, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Greg.
You've been listening to the Dementia Care Partners podcast, brought to you by Positive Approach to Care. For more information, go to teepasnow.com.